Good morning. This is Christopher Maher. I'm an attorney in Mahopac, New York, or Mahopac, as I say. Uh, it's a Friday morning show that I do, typically with my senior associate, Michael DiRienzo. He is unavailable this morning due to another commitment, but there's a subject that we had started speaking about last week, and that subject was taking good care of your driver's license. The reason I say taking good care of your driver's license is because I often find that people, especially with the pandemic that we have gone through, uh, I'm finding a lot of people didn't take as good a care of their driver's license as we would hope they would, and they end up becoming clients. What typically has happened here in a number of cases is that people will get tickets for moving violations typically. And people must understand that in New York, which is where my practice is, in the state and federal courts, that uh, the police in whatever jurisdiction, whether it's a sheriff's department, such as we have in Putnam County and Dutchess County, which has a big presence in both counties, and elsewhere throughout the state of New York, outside of the five boroughs of the city, the sheriff's departments, the state police, who everybody is, of course, familiar with, and local law enforcement, town, village, city police. They all have these plate readers technology in their vehicles. And so people will be driving along and they won't be thinking very much about being stopped, and they won't be committing any obvious violation of the vehicle and traffic law, such as speeding, but they get stopped for some reason. And the reason very often becomes that the person has had a situation which has happened with surprising frequency during the pandemic, but the person is getting tickets for things like speeding and equipment violations, or a headlights out, or something worse, like a DWI case or a driving while impaired by drugs case. And the person doesn't take care of, most of the time, the less severe tickets, and they end up in somebody's glove compartment or on the floor of somebody's car, and we all have busy lives. And that ticket at some other location in a court somewhere is going to be addressed, and you may not have dealt with it on your end, and you find out a day late and sometimes $1 short that you have had your driving privilege suspended or your New York license suspended for failing to appear in court somewhere. People often start the process. They'll send a notice to the court on the back of the ticket. They can plead not guilty, and then they forget about it. And then they find, again, a day late and $1 short, that the license that they submitted to the police officer has an old address. So suddenly the person has acts going on in court systems and at places like the Department of Motor Vehicles against them that can result in having a suspension of your license, or if you deal with it and you deal with it not knowing the full consequences, you can have points on your license. I find very often people say to me, well, I thought I got a good deal because the prosecutor took my speeding ticket from 90 and a 50 down to 65 and a 50. The person doesn't realize if they do that a few times, their insurance company that insures that vehicle and the Department of Motor Vehicles are keeping track of that. If you have 3 convictions in an 18-month period in the state of New York for moving violations, you can have your license suspended, and that means suspended. Uh, and very often people allow that to happen because they're not paying close enough attention to things like the address that they have given on their driver's license, and it may be an old address. It's not a defense in these cases where somebody says, I didn't get the notice because it went to my ex-boyfriend's address somewhere, and it caused the person to miss court. These types of problems tend to snowball, and very often people come to me because now they have suspensions in multiple courts for failing to appear in the court, or for worse, going to the court and just pleading guilty because the prosecutor seemed nice. The prosecutor didn't advise you, and they don't have to. It's not part of their job. They don't have to advise you that you face a potential action for points on your license in an 18-month period like I just described. And so very often these prosecutors have hundreds of tickets that they have to deal with in a single week. Many municipalities hire prosecutors to do nothing but prosecute traffic offenses. They're traffic prosecutors, they're lawyers, they know what they're doing, but their systems are overwhelmed as well. So they don't have time to sit there and explain to you, such as your own lawyer would, that if you take a step of pleading guilty to something and the prosecutor seemed nice and it just sounded like there was a fine involved, what they're not telling you is that when the Department of Motor Vehicles gets a hold of this information, it becomes cumulative. And that cumulative effect not only can affect your very license, and you may not know it if you still haven't corrected the old address on your license, so you're not getting the up-to-date information from the Department of Motor Vehicles, but it can also cause you to lose any insurance coverage that you have on your vehicle. Or if you don't lose the insurance coverage, you get placed in something called assigned risk, which you literally have a monthly mortgage payment of car insurance just to insure that vehicle that sits out in front of your house or apartment. And it becomes financially devastating, if nothing else. Once your license gets into that type of a state or a condition, you really need to go back to the courts where you on your own may have pled guilty to something that gave you moving violation points, and you have to try to rework it, which is not nearly as simple as it sounds, because once there is finality to some type of a court proceeding, whether you represented yourself or you had a lawyer, or very often I see people do this. They have a friend who's in law enforcement who goes with them, and that friend in law enforcement is taking their best steps, but they haven't been able to check the DMV website and download a driving abstract of the person's driving history. So they don't even know. They're just helping out as a friend helps out. I tell people every week, it doesn't cost people anything to call an attorney who is versed in this area of the law and is versed in those courts where you have these driving suspensions, and get advice from that lawyer on the phone. Before you do that, it's well worth, I think it's $10 to go onto the DMV website, or if the offices are open, to go to a DMV office and pay to have a printout of your driving abstract, so you know what you're talking about when you're talking to the lawyer on the phone and soliciting some free advice and a consultation that we give every day of the week. Because you don't want to have a situation where you are out driving and you don't realize, because you shouldn't realize, that the police officer behind you has a plate reader in their vehicle, and it's now reading that the car in front of them, your vehicle, is being operated with a suspended registration, or that the owner of the vehicle, if that's the same person, is driving with a suspended license. And it's happened to all of us that you don't want it to happen, where you get pulled over on the side of the road, and if the police officer is in the middle of something else, he or she is frantically trying to advise you that you better take care of what is a more serious problem than you may have thought previously. And it requires you to take all those steps, like going back to a court where I thought I took care of that, or it was the pandemic. And I know they were sending me, I had someone telling me yesterday that I thought it was the pandemic, so that they weren't going to do anything. They are going to do something. They're just going to do it in a different way. They're not going to bring you in necessarily and advise you that you have to take care of the problem. And if you have an old address on your driver's license, which has happened to all of us, you got to remember that in New York State, you have to notify the Department of Motor Vehicles within 10 days of any change of address. And it's well worth doing that, because you don't want to find out the hard way on a cold, dark night on the side of a highway somewhere, where you are en route somewhere or coming back from someplace, or have some people with you. And it can be embarrassing, if nothing else, or could end up worse with you in handcuffs, being taken to a police station where they're charging you with a new crime of aggravated unlicensed operation of a motor vehicle for having a suspended license from multiple suspensions. So people are welcome to call me or call any lawyer who is educated in this area of the law, and you can avoid points, you can avoid missing court, and you can avoid ultimately the loss of a license, because it's very painful to say to somebody that your license has been suspended or worse, or your insurance on your car has been suspended or worse, and it's a day late and $1 short. So you're welcome to call me anytime. And this is Chris Maher, and thanks for tuning in.